Good evening, greetings everyone, our eminent speakers and participants who have joined us today. Myself, Aditi Rai, an architect, urban planner, and an EPWG North Zone representative from ICOMOS India, take this opportunity of welcoming you all to the deliberation session of the webinar titled Local Area Plans, What, Why, and How. The discussion is organized by National Scientific Committee on Historic Towns and Villages, NSCHTV, North Zone Group, and Emerging Professional Working Group of ICOMOS India. It intends to serve as a platform for sharing and exchange of ideas that supports insight development on local area plans or LAPs as one of the important and effective legal tools for planning and translating the vision of a city's development to the grassroots level. The purpose of this webinar is to understand and be acquainted with the process of making local area plans and their importance in planning for urban areas with heritage value. The deliberation session will also look into relevant case studies and best practices that can contribute in our understanding of LAPs. A core working team of ICOMOS India has been constantly working on the review of Master Plan for Delhi 2041 to provide a set of suggestions that will help in enabling efficient and sustainable retention, protection, and management of intrinsic and diverse heritage assets in City of Delhi. The learnings and outcomes from today's discussion will contribute to the process of the MPD 2041 review. Again, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our eminent panelist, Edgar F. Rivorio, consulting urban planner, A.G.K. Menon, architect, urban planner and conservation consultant, and a member of ICOMOS India, K.T. Ravindran, urban designer and former chairman of Delhi Urban Arts Commission, convener of Intact Delhi chapter, and Annabel Lopez, heritage management consultant from Intact Delhi chapter and member of ICOMOS India. Dear panelists and participants, thank you again for being a part of this webinar. Now, I would like to introduce our session moderator, Dr. Sangamitra Basu. Dr. Basu is an architect and urban planner. As a Charles Wallace Fellow, she did her master's in conservation studies from York University, UK. Dr. Basu is a retired professor from the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur, and has over 35 years of experience in teaching, research guidance, and consultancy projects. She has worked extensively on documentation and participatory planning in the field of built and cultural heritage of Eastern India and is currently a consultant as a part of IIT KGP team to the West Bengal government for declaring Cooch Behar as a heritage city. She has several publications in journals, chapters in books, monographs, and papers presented in international and national conferences and authored over 60 technical articles. She has also organized several training programs and online courses on architectural conservation and historic preservation. During 2011 to 2014, she served as a member of the National Monuments Authority, Ministry of Culture of Government of India, and is currently an advisory member, steering committee of Scientific Council of ICOMOS India, and a member of Intact Architectural Division, Advisory Committee, and the architect member of Heritage Conservation Committee, Kolkata Municipal Corporation. Professor Basu, I'll ask you to please come forward and take up the stage and introduce our other eminent speakers and start with the session. You are on mute, Professor Basu. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Aditi, for the introduction. I would just like to add a few points. The master plan is a long-term comprehensive vision statement and outlines the future path of development in a statutory framework, but actual implementation of the policies and translation of the vision of master plan rest on the local area plan. And this is not only applicable for Delhi, but true for all urban areas and areas under panchayats. Because of the 74th Amendment, people and people's representatives are now empowered to plan for development of their localities based on ground realities and incorporate people's needs and aspiration in plans, be it urban or rural. So when we are talking about heritage areas, they are not only monuments and historical sites, we are talking in most cases about the living areas, where all aspects of development, facilities, amenities, people's livelihood and occupation, their day-to-day needs movement and infrastructure, open spaces, recreation, all need to be taken care of. Local people, residents, and all stakeholders need to have a say right from the plan formulation stage. And at the same time, special characteristics of areas need to be preserved and integrated with the development. Such integration and micro-level planning is the key to actualize the vision of master plan and land use control. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
Today we have with us from planners, pioneering, who are pioneers in the planning profession of India, urban designers and conservation experts who have played significant role in local area planning, spearheading its relevance, demonstrating in particular with the pilot projects for local area planning for heritage areas. To start with, we are grateful to have Professor Ribeiro with us, who will talk about the evolution of the local area planning. He's very well known. I will just briefly talk about his background. I think the detailed biodata is displayed. Professor Ribeiro is an architect from the Sir J.J. School of Arts, Bombay, and postgraduated in town and country planning from the University of Manchester, UK. After serving with the municipal borough and county council with UK's unitary system of developmental governments, he joined the town and country planning organization of Government of India and engaged in special plan formulation and advisory arm of the federal government for 5-year plan. After participating over 3 decades in the rapid transition from land use planning to integrated spatial development platforms, he superannuated as chief planner, TCPO, in December 1988. But he played several pioneering roles for operating TCP Department, Union Territory of Goa and Diu, to propose on behalf of Central Ministry Urban Design Guidelines for the mega city of New Delhi, serving as the first commissioner for planning in the Delhi Development Authority for providing spatial direction to integrated development. During his tenure as chief planner, a process was set up towards providing sustainable environmental management plans through center-state interaction and a shift that envisaged a municipal panchayat continuum. Post-retirement, he has served as the director of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, helping intact establish and run his Architectural Heritage Division, director of Association of Municipalities and Development Authorities, leading participatory spatial development through a down-top local self-government state center partnership. In between, he also served with UNCHS at Jamaica, and then in short spell in Asian capitals for such low-income settlements. He was also the deputy team leader for ADB-funded Bangalore Metropolitan Regional Plan. He was also the president for Institute of Town Planners India and first Asian vice president of the International Society for City and Regional Planners, ISOCAR. Professor Ribeiro has written extensively and participated widely in India and abroad in planning issues, especially the heritage upgrading, low-income housing, including in-situ upgrading and integrated and simplified spatial planning, and evolving land use patterns to the new emerging sustainable ecological management platform across India. He is now a consultant also to the controversial and much talked about territory of Lakshadweep. At 90 years, he now lives in a semi-retired life in Goa, but he still continues to inspire and interact with budding students and professional activists, vibrant and alert in neighborhood and old and new friends. Professor Rio, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Shangumitro. I have about 25 minutes. I would like to start off with the very last consultancy I did in Lakshadweep for a Supreme Court appointed committee and under Justice Ravindran. And he told me a very important thing. He says, you know, your planners do not know your role. They said, we give a judgment on the basis of the plan you all prepare. And if your plan is faulty, our judgments are faulty. And that was a very important advice that he offered. That means everything must fit into the law. You can change the law. And what are the legal aspects? Today's discussion on local area plans, and simply stated, local area plans, the focus of today's discussion, they have emerged as spatial development platforms due only to the epoch-making 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. These acts have unequivocally ensured that the electoral wards of local self-government is today the smallest spatial territory across India for processing sustainable development. Thus, through a constitutionally elected pancha for each rural ward and a corporator or councillor for each urban ward, a new down-top map of India has emerged, and where without overlaps, this is very critical, we can map rural wards that constitute the village panchayats and the urban maps and the urban wards that constitute the municipalities. So it is the constitutionally elected, and they cannot be superseded, panchas and corporators or councillors who constitute the municipalities and the panchayats. In turn, and again without overlaps, these municipalities and panchayats fall within the sub-districts or talukas or tehsils of the districts of the states of the Union, of the Republic of the Union. So it's very interesting that you can have this map without any overlaps. And that is the platforms which are now available, and it is for us to use it. In reality, the human settlement scenario of India today ensures and really an interplay between about 2.5 lakh panchayats and about 4,000 municipalities, roughly 2/3 of India's population in 2.5 lakh panchayats and 1/3 in approximately 4,000 municipalities. The 2.5 lakh panchayats brings together the 6.4 lakh villages. So we're not looking at villages and towns. We're no longer looking at urban and rural, but we are looking at municipalities and panchayats. I can tell you in Goa, we have single village panchayats, and we have 20 village panchayats according to population for elections. And what is important is the breakup of this into wards, into electoral wards, and which is a big missing link. Thus, since independence and based on the decennial census, we have adjusted all our policies, strategies, and built environment structures from a town-village context of the 50s to an urban-cum-rural interplay to now a continuum of municipalities and village panchayats within the administrative districts of each state of the large federal republic. This is a fact thanks to the constitutional amendment. Accordingly, on the ongoing top-down drivers of growth through parliament, through elected parliament and the assemblies of the states of the union, we now have a support of the down-top participatory infusion through elected municipalities and panchayats. This is the participatory level. Thus, what is now a constitutionally adjusted center, state, local interface is now best processed through a participatory local infusion to a tested center state drivers of sustainable growth. I'm mentioning this as the Constitution keeps on saying center state local, we have catered for it. But not to ruffle the feathers of the center state system, we're saying we're infusing a participatory local infusion into a tested center state drivers of sustainable growth. This is operationally implementable and guardedly so, as the Constitution goes further. And it says, it mandates 29 functions of governance to the village panchayats and 18 functions to municipalities, some mandatorily, some optional. And to do so, dedicated finances that trickling down to the panchayats, not to the villages, and to the municipalities, to the state finance commissions. What has emerged in the process is, of course, the importance of suddenly elected panchayats and corporators, but more strongly, their accountability. Experience has shown they all like the importance, but they do not like the accountability. And that is what has slowed down the process of down top. And this gets punctuated through a neighborhood or local constituency, and where it is at this level where every parcel of land are perforce mapped and transparently understood, debated, and processed. Hence, the local area plan emerges as a platform where the mapped word supersedes the written word. And written words means files which can disappear. So look at the strength which has gone back to those who have to prepare local area plans. That is, it is transparent. It's not easy to change maps without a process. It is easy to change files. So even despite RTI Act. So this is the great importance that professionals have now been given thanks to the Constitution, and how do they use it. So in brief, it is the local area plan that has since offered the required spatial platform from a shift from for the people to a not by the people, but for a shift for the people to a through the people, as governed by the center state directions of growth. This, I think, is the objective which has emerged. The second point I would like to raise here is what is planning? The two major terms of planning has been socio-economic investment planning and what we now call spatial planning. There's been a huge disconnect from 1950 onwards between the two. The socio-economic investment planning through the 5-year plans, which always gained traction because that's where the finances were being given and the states were interested in the finances. And the master plan, which started off as an ancillary to municipal functions. But today, thanks to Niti Aayog system, these two critical, hitherto divergent planning typologies are converging, have converged towards providing workable platforms, in brief, a motto: social economic investments through spatial frameworks. And it is here where the important ways of looking at all plans, master plans, development plans, and local plans are important. Legally, these frameworks that legally inform on how land is to be used and at what intensity is catered to only in the state list, not in the central and concurrent list. So the state list, through the Town and Country Planning Acts and its equivalent, now enlarged in its scope as Urban and Regional Development Planning Acts and its equivalent, is the only platform which tells you how land can be used and at what intensity. If there is something to be that comes from top, like airport areas or railways and cantonment and military establishments, they have to be mapped. It is the duty of the spatial plan to bring all that on board, and round it you prepare spatial plans at 3 levels. So what is now available to us, what has emerged is we have to prepare broad brush regional spatial directional plans, which define the municipalities and the village panchayats as the development platforms, and their detailing supporting local area plans. The 2041 update, which is now under debate through NIUA, mentions that what is required are local are required plans which support master plans and zonal plans. But the term local area plan is a terminology which is gaining traction. And I think with confidence we can use it, because from a number of objections that have come, and which are now the date has been extended, expert after expert is mentioning where are the local area plans and how can you take Delhi forward without the local area plans. So within this process, the significance of the constitutionally savvy local area plans is being debated today through the master plan of Delhi with focus on its heritage. This, the first comprehensive spatial platform in the country and for the national capital, has served as the forerunner of such frameworks across the country. The geography of Delhi, please remember, Delhi, it's 1,483 square kilometers, came into being when it was decided to shift the capital. And what happened, they said, the entire tehsil of Mehrauli, of the Lieutenant Governor's province of Punjab, will be brought in, and across the river, one of the tehsils of the United Provinces of Shatara would be brought in. And together they would comprise of 1,483 square kilometers. This has constituted the Union Territory. 1,483 has not shifted. So this national capital, this Union Territory, has a geography of several layers of history, and on which has now rapidly emerged and which has now rapidly emerged as the core of one of the world's fastest and largest mega city regions, and where retaining and enhancing its local identity and footprints is overdue. Can the two merge? Of course they can. So the importance of the local area plan as a platform to address this issue has severally been stressed in the ongoing objections suggestion process of Master Plan 41. So this is more or less, I want to now mention a few more points before I pass on the speaker. A little bit about Delhi. These facts are also important for us to know. Between 1941, between the census of 1941 and 1951, Delhi's decennial growth was an unacceptable 114%, largely due to partition. The breakdown of services and excessive slum-like conditions existed. And it was thought the only way to do it is to prepare a comprehensive master plan, not the basis of master plans prepared from 1914 onwards, starting with the Bombay Town Planning Act, as a support to municipal functions. The term was comprehensive master plans. The debates that were going on was very important. The national, it was then thought that we can have decennial growth rates to the extent a local body can service a settlement. And that figure was pegged at 30%. It was pegged at 40%. Anything beyond 40% meant that you had to stop in migration and you had to bring in, that is how the regional concept also emerged. And I must tell you, when this was debated over the years, the National Commission on Urbanization said 40% is not correct, it should be 30%. That is giving you the metropolitan region a greater a reason to. The second thing is, the Delhi Development Authority didn't come in a vacuum. It was an upgradation of the Improvement Trust. The third thing that emerged was the word slums emerged in a big way. And what this Delhi plan in debate said, this term slum removal is wrong. It was slum upgradation. And the National Slum Upgradation Act, which applied first to Delhi, spoke on upgradation and not removal. Later, we're dealing with shelter upgradation. All these issues were very pertinent to bring in. The Delhi Development Act, which was brought in as a firefighting measure, it did a few things. This shows which things are not possible now. It was an infusion. It was an order from the center. And these were very drastic orders. They said to make it function, we should merge local bodies. Delhi at that time had 8 or 9 local bodies. They were merged into a single municipal corporation of Delhi Act. It had one district state. The central government formulated a land acquisition and development policy. No freehold. Everything is land as a resource and leasehold. On that basis, a plan was prepared for a 20-year perspective. This plan stated, the Delhi Development Act has stated just 2 important things. A, you will prepare a plan. The plan will have a perspective, say, of 20 years, updated every 5 years, and as and when required. It is a rolling plan, and that is why MPD 81 MPD 2001, MPD 21 and 41 is a rolling plan because there is no provision to say there will be no plan. I mentioned this because a lot of people said, oh, let's wait for 81, there'll be no plan, then we can do whatever we want. That is not true. The perspective started changing. So the second is, the Act also says that MPD will undertake, that development will be undertaken on the basis of a plan, and that's why we need a development authority. This led to a huge debate. Is it a master plan or a development plan? In reality, it is a development plan, but technically called a master plan. The population increase is very important. From 2 million existing, it would go to 6.3 million. This, which is not good, it should be brought down to 5.7, 30%, 40%, etc. And they had the concept of Delhi and its ring town. Suddenly, when we found it had to be updated, I was involved with the second plan, and instead of getting 5.7, we had 63. What failed was Delhi did not apply the brakes and it grew. The ring town side have given us a reason to grow, so we have grown. What crime have we committed? They both grew, and Delhi went to 6.3. We said this is not good, so we should then have a plan and not more than 12 million. So the second plan was 12 million. What happened in between was very important. The ring town concept was not working, and they said they introduced by law, the first time in India, the National Capital Region Planning Board. In other words, Delhi was the core of the National Capital Region. This was not fully applied in a big way. Then it was applied subsequently. Suddenly 12 million by 2001 grew to 13 million, and we said we'll restrict it to 18 million. And the policy was very clear that we will look at the metropolitan region in 3 layers. The core, which was the whole of the NCTD, we had a central NCR and the rest of the NCR. The policy was reduce the rate of growth of the core, regulate the rate of growth of the central NCR, and accelerate the rate of the growth of the outer NCR. So this policy still holds. I'm mentioning this because the 2041 NCR, the plan prepared by the NIUA and the DDA in combination seems to have concentrated very strongly on the central NCR. We get into the same pitfall of both developing too fast. And this has to be borne in mind. The earlier NCR was concentric rings. The new NCR of 2021 was very important. It was based on the constitutional amendment. It was an exercise that started gaining traction because it was called an exercise of a 22 district exercise. That meant you didn't only take Alwar Tehsil, you took Alwar district, the third largest district of India at that time. You took the Delhi change from a single district to 9 districts. You took the 5 districts of UP out of its 70 odd districts, and you took the 7 districts of Haryana into the region. Once you treated it as a 22 district exercise and put it down to sub-districts, municipalities and panchayats, the whole exercise of moving around population up and down suddenly found place through governance as the main issue. The second main issue was it facilitated a very important transportation policy, the movement of goods and people, and the transportation of people was, if you've got 12 million people at that time, each person makes 1.5 trips per day. 18 million trips was not a very easy thing. And you said, put all the stress in walk trips. The second stress should be on public transport, and treat the personalized vehicle as an enemy of city growth. On the basis of these two principles, which still applies, and if that is the case, a lot of other things fall in place. And finally, what I would like to say, as this plan has been a transition from a land use plan in the 60s to a transportation cum land use plan in the 70s to a services cum traffic and transportation plan of the 80s, and now an environment management plan. And coming finally to the main topic today, heritage. To me, the heritage chapter has to take into account what the Act says. You have to map what the Archaeological Survey says. 172 national monuments with 100 meters and 300 meters line, with the National Monuments Authority defining it. The State Archaeology Act with its lines also. It has to be mapped. And finally, the conservation buildings and which have to be shown. If these three, the conservation takes its strength from the Delhi Master Plan. Others are the imposition of protection, where protection and is a little distinct from conservation. If these three are shown, and whatever we say about heritage has to fit into all this. And I think the heritage zones, and it was on this basis, largely as understood, I finally refer to the Tejinder Khanna committee, which in discussion which I had with him when we were doing an upgradation of low income settlements of part of the Tejinder Khanna committee, it is there that he sold the idea to me. Why don't we process the local area plan? As Lieutenant Governor, I can push it. And that is how we got the local area plans. We chose 5 groups, and they were the intact Delhi chapter. We took the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, the Ambedkar University, Delhi, the Jamia Millia, and AMDA, of which I was heading then, was easy. These 5 groups we distributed as to what kind of a system each of these wards had. Identify the wards, and then do the planning. So the biggest absence in today's Delhi plan, it needs to be brought in, is the governance map of Delhi. The governance map of Delhi is a very critical aspect for any discussions, and that will show very clearly that Delhi comprises of 5 municipalities. There are no panchayats any longer in Delhi. You've got 3 corporations, the New Delhi Municipal Council, the only council in India where no local elections are held, and you've got the Cantonment Planning Board. All these are without overlaps. You have at the same time 284 wards. These have to be shown. You have at the same time the districts, revenue districts and the police zones, which are about 12 now. And you've got the 22 zones. The master plan role ends with preparing the master plan that gives you the framework for preparing the zonal plans. And then the rest has to be taken over by local area plans driven by local authorities. And I think 5 or 6 pilot zones we took was the heritage zones, to which we left intact to give us the expertise. And I think that is the presentation which we are going to discuss. There were a lot of plus points, but once Tejinder Khanna left and once the top-down system of governance has really taken place, this needs to be revived if we have to get anywhere, and this is to serve as ideal for others trying to follow. This is what I have to say as an introductory note to the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ribeiro, that you have really set the tone and given us a very elaborate background that how it has started. So as you rightly said, that we have to see how this government's plan has been actually implemented through the municipal pilot case studies. We are now inviting Professor A.J.K. Krishna Menon and Annabel Lopez, who have really taken part in doing the pilot projects. Professor Menon is an architect, urban planner, and conservation consultant practicing in Delhi for over 40 years. He has been simultaneously teaching and co-founded the TVP School of Habitat Study. He is also actively engaged in research, and his contributions have been extensively published in professional journals and several academic books. He is a founding member of INTAC and has undertaken several urban conservation projects around the country to formulate context-specific protocols for engaging with the country's urban heritage. In 2004, he collated these experiences to draft the INTAC Charter for the conservation of unprotected architectural heritage and sites in India. He also will be joined by Annabel Lopez. Annabel Lopez is an architect and heritage management consultant with more than 3 decades of experience in the conservation of the built heritage. She has been involved in the preparation of World Heritage nomination dossiers, conservation management plans, and heritage impact assessment. Her professional interests range from documentation to legislation for the protection of 19th and 20th century architecture and planning. She undertakes consultancy projects for organizations like INTAC and World Monuments Fund. She is the coordinator of NSC 20th Century Heritage, ICOMOS India, and expert member of ICOMOS ISC 20th Century. So with this, I welcome Professor Menon and Annabel to in one by one present and tell us about the actual process of formulating the local area plan. Professor Menon.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that Professor Ribeiro had a very detailed introduction to planning. And in a way, I'll be the spoiler in the sense that I will be giving a ground reality of what this fantastic idea is. Because we have a fantastic idea. Theoretically, our planning is perfect. We have got everything in place, but somehow it's not working. And I will be talking about why it is not working and what we can possibly do about it. And the reason we are talking today is that I do believe that the local area plan is the key to solving the problems. We may have a perfect plan, but unless we have the people's participation and their involvement in it, the plan is not going to work. It has not worked for 60 years, and we are still going to go for another master plan. And I'm just worried that we seem to be reinventing the wheel each time. Each 20 years, we make another master plan. And again, we say it is not working. Again, we make a new vision. And this is also a fantastic vision. If you read this document, it says we've got a new vision. The last master plan said we had a new vision. And the previous master plan said we had a new vision. So this is also a new vision. So I will really be talking about some of the problems we're facing. And the problems I'll be coming up with is really the planner and the conservation architect. Because both of us are so, shall we say, full of our ideas that we won't talk to each other. And unless the planner and the conservation architect is willing to talk to each other and come up with some kind of via media, in other words, the conservation architect has to give up some ideas and the planner has to give up some ideas, some of these perfect ideas. And then only can we maybe begin to make sense of our spatial planning. So let me now begin by, how do I start to share screen now? My presentation is going to be on some of the problems. I'll start off with the problems. We have got, as I said, a perfect idea what a plan ought to be, but yet we are not doing something right. And I'll begin off with what we are not doing right. There are many examples I can give you, but let me give you one example, the Vishwanath Dham project. Vishwanath Dham project is about a a complex historic city which we want to redevelop. We've got plans, we've got ideas, we've got conservation architects, we've got planners, but yet what happens? So we have a plan in which we have everything torn down and made into a beautiful plaza. Why does this happen? Why is it that we are not able to give up the idea that, to do a project in Varanasi, we've got to give up some ideas about planning. We can't have these beautiful plazas. We cannot have these idea of an ideal city, a Western kind of city. Now, what's happening in Varanasi is just to show you the area that is marked here is all going to be demolished, is being demolished, has been demolished. And this is going to be built like this, completely different from what the structure of the city is, because they say that the historic city is chaotic, it's a mess. So this is Indian urbanism. And Indian urbanism is a mess. And what is perfect urbanism is some kind of a Western urbanism. And this is what it comes. And if you listen to the presentation, it is about the fact that Vitruvius said this: have one square, have a second square, add to this, extend this, and you'll get a perfect urban design. Now, in the middle of Varanasi. So this is the kind of problem we're facing, and this is what we're ending up with. The Vishwanath, the temple, everything has to demolish to produce it. This is the scene of development. So I ask you, where are the planners? Where are the conservation architects? Why are we ending up with this? This is what's going to happen. So everything is going to be cleared up and a completely new plan is going to be done. And this is what the whole idea is. And so I'm saying that the only way to do this is that if, for example, they had done a local area plan in that place, perhaps we would not have ended up with that kind of problem. Now, the question is that quite right. The layman asks, but it's dirty, but it's messy. But that is exactly the problem of the planner. That's exactly the problem of the conservation architect. He's supposed to make something better out of it. Not destroy it, but make something better out of it. So I'll use the example of, as Professor Ribeiro said, that we did several local area plans, and I'll come to the end why it didn't work, why the local area plan didn't work. But it is a way that we're going to make it work. Kotla Mubarakpur is one area, and as Professor Ribeiro said, I'll just quickly mention 74th Amendment, the master plan, all these things there. So a local area plan is informed by the 74th Amendment, the master plan, and the Delhi Municipal Corporation Act, the bill. So these things create the conditions for the local area plan. Now, what's wrong with this? It's a wonderful idea. What's wrong with it? Now, what's wrong with it is if you see this diagram, you start off with a master plan, then you go to a zonal plan, then you go to a local area plan, and then you do a layout plan. Now, the fact of the matter is, by the time the master plan is done, the local area has already been developed. And we have got, when we did started working on the local area plan, we had to find out more where the master plan did not work, where the zonal plan did not work. So the problem was really how to correct the master plan, how to correct the zonal plan. Now, are we willing to do that? If the planner is going to sit on the high horse and say, no, I made a perfect plan, and you better follow me. We are not following. We have not followed. The local area has not followed, and I'll show you why we have not followed it. And the layout plan follows. The only thing that worked was the master plan worked, the layout plan worked. Layout plan is things like, Defense Colony was planned, Green Park was planned, universities were planned. These were layout plans. They were planned and built according to the master plan. But in between, something went wrong because development outpaced planning. So the problem we are facing is not a perfect plan, but how to work within the system where our economy is going so fast, our society is transforming so fast, that how do I then make a master plan for a situation where we are all the time running? How do you make a plan while we are running, not while we are staying still? A master plan can be made when you're standing still. A zonal plan can be made when you're standing still. And a perfect local area plan can be made when you're standing still. But it's not the situation. In reality, local area plan has gone way ahead. And the zonal plan has still not been done. I've known examples where the zonal plans are coming for development, where 98% of the plan had already been done. And now they're saying, give us an approval. So are we going to wake up as planners and say that, look, we have to have another system of planning? This perfect system of planning from the top down is not working. The only thing that can work is let us look at the local area plan and go backwards and make a zonal plan and make a master plan. So that is the only answer that can work. And as Professor Guerrero said, that is a big lacuna in the 2041 master plan, because it says no local area plans from now on. And that's exactly the attitude of the planner. To solve the problem, get rid of the problem. Not solve the problem, get rid of it. Local area plans is the problem, so we are not going to have local area plans. Now, where does that leave us? Where does it leave the citizen? So where we talk about participatory approach, bottoms-up approach, collaborative approach, local resources centered approach, it is not working. The perfect idea. So an example is that we taken this Kotla Mubarak code. You have to make a map. The map is very difficult. Do you know in Delhi, we have a beautiful aerial survey. It is not accessible. When we were making local area plans, we were not allowed to use these maps. And we had to spend 3 months, we were given 6 months to make a master, the local area plan. 3 months were spent to try and get an authentic plan. So tell me, how can we do a perfect plan when it takes us 3 months to even get a local? So we use Google Maps, and Google Maps are not accurate. And from that we superimposed on the survey of India map, and from that we made a base. So half the time we are trying to make a base map. So the attributes of the local area plan, I think, are perfect. You know, it has to be all approved layout plans, yes. But then we got a lot of unauthorized colonies and a lot of slums and urban villages. I'll give you one example. When we did the master plan of Delhi in 1962, it was as though to say it was a greenfield situation. Blank area, we'll make this perfect plan. But do you realize that there were 290 villages there? What happened to the 290 villages when this master plan was made? Very simple. Put a lal dora and say that they don't bother us. And we make a plan irrespective of it. So you tell me, how can we make a perfect master plan when you ignore the ground realities? And so today we are faced with a situation where we have all these attributes and it does not work. So at the end of the day, when we made the local area plan finally and go to the government, they say, well, we can't approve it. Why can't we approve it? Because they're not as per the master plan. And we're saying, of course, it's not as per the master plan, because development has already taken place. What are you going to do? Are you going to demolish all it and come back to the master plan and then say we got a perfect local area plan? So these are the kind of problems that we face in making local area plans. Attributes are perfect. And, you know, for example, take the mixed use streets. There are many mixed use streets. Slowly, the DDS says, yes, this is a mixed use street. Why it was not a mixed use street earlier? It was a residential area. Suddenly it becomes a mixed use street. Now that requires a lot of other things. Parking situation changes, transport changes. How do you do it? So the problem is that in all these situations that we have idea, but the problem has already outstripped the idea. Now, let us say the local area plan is perfect. Why is it perfect? Because it is a qualitative and quantitative tool for assessing public satisfaction and participation in the planning process. Perfect. Now, if I say that this is what the people want, the DDA says it is not as per the plan. This is already illegal colonies. How can we say that these have to be legalized? So when we did said that these are illegal colonies and they have to be made legal, they said, no, but they don't have this kind of streets. They don't have this kind of schools. They don't have this kind of infrastructure. So what do we do then? Back to square one. They remain illegal. They remained illegal for 40 years. For the next 20 years, again, they'll remain illegal. So the local area plan says for the first time, urban residents in the wards are involved and beginning to understand the city from where they live. This meets an important objective of inclusive planning. Perfect. But when the people understand it, the planner says, hey, hold it, hold it, hold it. No, you're not allowed to do that. You understood it, but I'm sorry, it's not allowed. How do we face that problem? Because do you know, at the end of the day, after you made the local area plan, they did not approve it. Because they said, but this is not right. It is not as per the master plan, it's not as per the zonal plan. But we said that's exactly the problem. The local area plan has already gone well beyond it. Now, the fact of the matter is the only thing we achieved was this is no mean feat that from the planning system that expects society to submissively accept the dictates of the master plan and be labeled illegal. People suddenly found where they actually stand. They recognize the fact that they're in an area which is in the prohibited area of the heritage. So then we come to the NMA, National Monument Authority, and say, look, what do you do here? This is an ASAP protected monument. This is a prohibited area. This development has already come up. What do we do? Say, sorry, this is a prohibited area, no development permitted. So, we're constantly fooling ourselves. And that is why this presentation is based on the fact that, and this is a case study, I could have gone into the case study to show you exactly the kind of problem that came. And it's a wonderful way of finding the ground realities, which even perhaps DDA does not know. You got to find out the residential pockets, densities, infrastructure, what the zonal plan says, what the master plan says, what is legal, what is illegal, where are the markets, where are the illegal developments, all that is marked. And it also shows where the mixed use areas have come up, again shown. And it shows the metro corridors, because now we've got a metro, and the metro corridor says that 500 meters on either side can be re-densified. You show that. But they say, no, don't show it, because where's the 500 meters, we don't know. So we could not show the 500-meter line in the local area plan, because the DD had not shown it. So if you show it, it becomes a legal document. They didn't want a legal document. So we just said that, yes, approximately here there is a metro influence zone, but we are not showing it. Because if we show it, some resident can come up and say that, look, my house comes in this area, I can get extra FAR. Give me extra FAR. They say, no, we are not ready to do that. So this is the problem. Our ideas are outstripping our realities are outstripping the ideas. Similarly, heritage. We marked all the heritage precincts. We've got so many ASI protected monuments, all the 100 meters and 200 meter regulated zone, all were shown. And if you notice on the right side, the pink area, the entire area is covered. It's already developed. Now, what do I do? How do I make the heritage plan according to the AMSR Act, which says that show the prohibited area, show the regulated area, but they've already been developed. And if you can see from this area, it's all been developed. So this is why I come to the fact that even the conservation architect has to begin to see, well, how do I do it? If you see the bottom photograph, that is Mubarak Shah's tomb. That's an ASI protected monument. That's a nationally protected monument. What do I do there? All the developments have come up. Where do I show the 100 meters? Where do I show the 200 meters? And why are we showing 100 meters and 200 meters for Mubarak Shah's tomb? Can't we have another way of protecting this tomb? Must we have only the AMSR Act, which says 100 meters and 200 meters? So this is what I'm saying, that the imagination of the planner and the conservation architect has to be changed. So several issues were there: unplanned development, drains, water supply, all were meticulously modified. All the garbage, everything was shown, but nothing could be done. All the issues were identified. What do you do? And the facilities matrix, because our plan is perfect. It says for so much population, you must have so many schools and so many health dispensaries and so many bazaars, so many banquet halls. Everything should be there. How do I fulfill these units that are required? I need, for example, 6 local area shopping. Where do I show the 6 local area shopping? According to the facility matrix, I'm supposed to have that. I'm supposed to have the only thing that's adequate maybe is a few things like dispensaries. No, number of existing 7 dispensaries there, no further required. Dispensaries are shown. So like that, how to fulfill all these things? So the characteristics of Kota Mubarakpur were shown. The ward is primarily residential character. There's a lot of mixed land uses there. Beyond the notified streets, planned portions of the ward lies under the influence zone of MRTS. What do we do about it? The ward has rich heritage, but many of the structures were found to be in ruins, loose hanging wires, filthy streets, encroached lanes, disturbed many of the monuments. What do we do about it? Physical infrastructure in terms of water supply, electricity supply, and solid waste disposal found to be ill-managed. How do I begin to manage it? So all the problems are identified. Lack of recreational space makes the condition even worse. Therefore, these villages that account for more than 50% of the total area of the ward should be developed under redevelopment and renewal schemes to ensure healthy living environment. So when we went to the villages and said that, look, we need to redevelop it, they said, look, don't touch us. We want to remain exactly the way we are. So this is the reality of the city, and yet we theoretically say that we've got a perfect plan. So in conclusion, I'll just take a lot of time trying to vent my anger, but I've got 3 or 4 points which I want to conclude by saying that one, ideologies of both urban planning and conservation of the built heritage have evolved separately in India. The genealogies manifest itself in a debilitating binary of civic governance that evaluates projects as development versus conservation. Invariably, the development takes over priority over conservation. And this is what we've seen over 40 years. Conservation has always suffered. So how do I go through these this genealogy, and how do I tell the conservation architect, look, we've got to look at conservation slightly differently. We can't go by our genealogy, which says that, oh, I have a perfect situation where I can have 100 meters protected area, prohibited area, 200 meters regulated area. I've got to have another system. I'm going to forget the origins of these rules and come up with new rules. This binary creates major conflicts in urban areas where it significantly impacts the ends of achieving greater public good. Ultimately, as planners and professionals, our idea is to create public good, maybe through protection of monuments, in the ideal way, in the next to ideal way, in the least ideal way. Are we prepared to say the least ideal way of protecting a monument is this? This will create a better public good than not having anything at all. To resolve it requires that the objectives of both ideologies are rational and pragmatically modified so that their objectives are aligned for effective civic governance on the basis of conditions of prevailing locality. And this is where the local area plan. The most effective process to create this balance between what is ideal and practical, both for urban planning and conservation of built heritage, is to undertake local area plans. We'll make the local area plan. When we talk to NMA and say, look, this is the local area plan of Mubarakpur. Can we have a different kind of mechanism? Can we go to DGA and say, can we have a that is the problem. The challenge facing people is not that this balance is not theoretically possible. As Professor Ribeiro mentioned, theoretically perfectly achievable. But to institutionalize the process of a pragmatic tool of urban governance management, that requires this local area plan. So thank you. That was my brief presentation. I want to tell you the problems. And I think Annabelle will explain some of the problems that emerge from the heritage point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Manan. It was really, you talked about the ground reality and all the contradictions. So I now request Annabelle to make her presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Niyati and Professor Basu. It is indeed an honor to be presenting some of the work that INTAC has been doing in this field. I will begin by sharing my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see this.
Yes. And that's in full screen mode. No,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes. Fine.
Just a minute, please. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the role of the local area plan in protecting heritage sites and precincts. Okay, so the focus of my 10-minute presentation today is the development within the regulated areas of nationally protected monuments. What you can see on the screen is a map of Delhi showing the concentration of the ASI, which is the centrally protected monuments. We have tried to depict the monument itself with a little dot or the footprint of the building, and around that, what you see here in the darker red and the lighter pink color is the 100 and the 200-meter zone around the centrally protected monuments. Now, as per the AMSAR Act and the mandate of National Monuments Authority, NMA, they are supposed to be preparing site-specific regulations for every nationally protected monument in Delhi. Unfortunately, a lot of these, most of these have not been prepared. So as a result, there are various challenges that are faced by people who set about developing their individual projects, properties. And with 3 case studies today, I'm going to show you how a lack of these regulations affects both the site as well as the project proponent and the hardships that he faces. So the first case study I will take up is the development of the National Museum of Natural History, which was proposed to come up around adjacent to Purana Killa. The second one is of 440 kV substation in Tughlakabad, and the third is a redevelopment scheme in Shahjahanabad. So the first case study is the lack of site-specific bylaws. This is Purana Killa Fort, the moat in front of it. Purana Killa is a 16th century building of great architectural as well as cultural significance because it is believed to have the oldest settlement in Delhi, Indraprasth, and it is also the legendary capital of the Pandavas. Excavations at this site have revealed findings from the 3rd and the 4th century and pottery fragments from 1000 BC. The structures that you can see above ground are from the Mughal period, Humayun city of Deenpana, and most importantly, it has architecture of the Sood dynasty. The Sood dynasty has very few architectural remains, and Qila-e-Koina, which is this mosque on the top, and is probably the most important remnant of the Sood dynasty in Delhi today. The project that was proposed, this is the footprint of Purana Killa. This is the river Yamuna. For those of you not familiar with Delhi, that is India Gate and the central vista going off that. And this is Bairomagh. The project site was just 75 meters from the wall of Purana Killa. And what was proposed was a building for the National Museum of Natural History. It was a ground plus 4 structure with a height of 24 meters approximately. And below here, you can see what was proposed by the Ministry of Environment and Forests. On a plot area of approximately 6 acres, they had a built-up area of 31 square meters and a ground coverage of just 35%. But however, the point I'm making in this presentation is that there were no regulations prepared by NMA for what is permissible in the vicinity of Purana Killa, which is a nationally protected monument. As a result, firstly, the land which was green in the master plan has been converted to allow the National Museum of Natural History. That was the first anomaly here. And then, in the absence of any regulations to guide what is permissible in the regulated area, they have gone and prepared this proposal. The stage at which it was given to NMA for approval was when the building was designed, detailed, they had their services worked out, everything from their plumbing, air conditioning, everything was worked out, and then they went to NMA for approval. At this stage, INTAC, which was preparing the heritage impact assessment, looked at the project, both the proposal as well as studied the significance of Purana Killa in great detail. We had historians working on establishing what is significant about Purana Killa and how will it be impacted if this development is allowed to come up. And The impact assessment showed that the authenticity of the setting would be severely impacted. And Purana Killa has, if I can go to the next slide, which shows Killa-i-Koina, and the only place where Killa-i-Koina is visible is from Bairon Marg, which is the road adjacent to this proposed development. And if this construction was allowed to come up in this manner, it would completely obliterate the view of Killa-i-Koina from public memory. And in this structure, which was proposed to be 24 meters high, would forever hide the view of the only remaining remnant of the Sood dynasty in Delhi. Unfortunately, this is the only place where the public really sees this view. So we decided at INTAC that this proposal in the form that it was presented to NMA should not be allowed. Some recommendations were made, some mitigation measures. We did take into consideration the fact that this location for a facility of this nature, which would bring tourists in a hub, which has other tourist places of interest like the Crafts Museum, etc., would be a very good location. It had the locational advantage, but because of the significance to of Purana Killa and the impact on Purana Killa, it was decided that we will ask for some mitigation measures. And the design would not be allowed perhaps in the current proposal as it was proposed, but with some changes to the design, perhaps it would be allowed in that location. So what the mitigation measures suggested was definitely a reduction in the height. It should not go above the treetop level. The architectural language could change to conform a bit to the precinct, this historic precinct. And one of the suggestions was to have a totally subterranean design. Also of concern was that being an archaeological site, the archaeological remains should be conserved, if any. And as a result of this heritage impact assessment, the Ministry of Environment and Forests had to withdraw that proposal. Unfortunately, they could not go totally underground because of the high water table in the area, but the advantage to the heritage was that this remnant of the Sood dynasty, which as you can see is really an outstanding piece of architecture, was saved, and people could continue to see it as they do today. So the point being made here is that if site-specific building regulations were in place, the effort, energy, and resource spent in developing projects would not be wasted the way it was in this site. So again, to emphasize, site-specific regulations for all nationally protected monuments is a must to ensure that any development project, be it a government project or not, can be designed as per those regulations. This shows here that Purana Killa, that's the footprint, and there's a 100-meter and a 200-meter buffer. So what we are looking at is not essentially a offset of the footprint, but if site-specific regulations have to be prepared, they have to really look at how the significance of that property can be retained. And in some cases, you might find that this buffer is not 200 meters in one direction. For example, if you're looking at certain sight lines to be retained, or you're looking at certain vistas to be preserved, then in that direction, the buffer could change depending upon what is significant for that particular site. Now, to go to the next example that I have today is a 400 kV substation, which was proposed in Tughlakabad. Now, Tughlakabad in the master plan of Delhi, both this version as well as the earlier one, has been identified as an archaeological park. Unfortunately, that's all it remains, just a single line mention in the master plan. No provision has been made to identify the boundary of that archaeological park, neither then. And even in this master plan, one of our biggest observations is that so the memory and processing is okay, is that meant for me? Sorry, I can't hear that.
It was a disturbance. Please.
Okay. Okay. So just a little background on the Tughlaq cultural landscape. It is this is the Tughlaq Fort. There is the Ghiyasuddin tomb, which is probably the most prominent site in this area, in this complex. And you have the Adilabad Fort and the Naika Fort, which is really a small. But the important point here is that while the delineation has not happened, the ASI till this point had retained the sanctity of the area, and no construction at all was allowed to come up in between these sites. So these sites are visible from each other. Originally, when these fortifications were designed, the visual lines from one to the other were very clear, and what was probably the protection was the low-lying area, which was originally filled with water, and that served as the defense mechanism for this area. Now, this visual connect has been retained till now, or at least till this substation came up. What was proposed was a substation here, and the proposal went to ASI for approval. ASI approved this substation, unfortunately, not realizing that in addition to the substation, there would also be supply lines coming in and going out from the substation. So they analyzed the situation when they gave permission and said the line of sight from Tughlaqabad to Ghiyasuddin's tomb is not affected by the substation. The line of sight from Ghiyasuddin's tomb to Adilabad Fort is not affected, and they allowed the substation to come up. The Power Grid Association, when they went to ASI for permission, had not disclosed the routing of the power lines. And when they subsequently went to ASI again to say that we now have to put up our power lines, NME objected and said prepare a visual impact assessment. INTAC undertook this visual impact assessment, and on assessing the situation, we looked at these towers which were going to go up 84 meters. Now you can imagine the scale of this. The Qutub Minar in Delhi is 72 meters, and these were almost 10 meters higher than that. So these very, very tall towers were proposed in this cultural landscape. It was a big struggle to decide how to assess this, because on one hand, this power line was going to supply Delhi with power. It was also going to facilitate the shutting down of a power plant, which was a very polluting power plant. So on one hand, you had these power lines which were going to completely intrude into this cultural landscape, and at the same time we know it is an infrastructure that has to be allowed. So because of the location of the substation that was already permitted and construction had been complete, there was very little we could do in this case to save the cultural landscape from this intrusion. And as a result, all we could do was to say divert some of the lines beyond the line of sight, and one line was taken underground, but some of the towers were allowed to come up. So here again, the point that one is making is that the need for planning at the individual site level. It is essential to delineate the boundary where no construction can happen. It is essential to define what is the significance of each of these and which sightlines have to be maintained. If this exercise was done, it's very clear that even the 200-meter buffer that is kept normally by ASI would have been adequate to save this area from the towers that have now come up in these locations. So in summary, all mitigation options were considered, but there was no option and we had to allow some of the lines. Also considering the fact that ASI had also granted permission to the substation when the Power Grid Association went the second time with permission for the towers. Yeah, that is just showing again the 100-meter and the 200-meter buffer. But at the master plan level, there is absolutely no delineation of the extent of this archaeological park. And that is an image from the last master plan. The third example I have for today is a development proposed in this instance again by a division of the government, by the municipal corporation itself in Shahjahanabad. Now, Shahjahanabad, as you all know, densely built up area. There are a few nationally protected monuments. In this case, we are looking at the tomb of Razia Sultan, which is right there. This is 100 meters from the tomb in an area in which according to law, no construction is permitted at all, and beyond that is the regulated area. The municipal corporation themselves were proposing this redevelopment in the regulated area. In addition to being in the regulated area, part of this area is also a grade 3 notified building, again notified by the municipal corporation itself. Now, this is just to say that while we have all the regulations in place, enforcement and an understanding of what this actually means on ground is sadly lacking. So a detail, a little bit more about what this development proposed. This is the footprint of what was proposed to be redeveloped. Another point I have to make here is that though the walled city of Shahjahanabad is identified as a heritage zone, and there are regulations in place for what can be done to the notified heritage buildings, there is nothing defining what happens to the rest of the city fabric. So in addition to the regulated area, you also have the rest of the city fabric. There is no special regulation defining this. The issue here is that if the rest of Shahjahanabad is allowed to develop like the rest of Delhi, the unique character of this walled city, of this Mughal walled city, which yes has historic layers beyond the Mughal period, will be completely destroyed, because in the rest of Delhi you are allowed to build stills, you are allowed to have basement parking, you are allowed to amalgamate plots. If this kind of development is allowed in Shahjahanabad, you will no longer see the unique character of Shahjahanabad. Now, in this particular case, the development that was being proposed was looking at amalgamating all these individual plots. The orange tells you that this is mixed use and the yellow is purely residential. And in addition, this is the area that is protected by MCD. So here again, development proposed, this is the proposal that was prepared by the architect for the municipal corporation, and he was looking at this long linear development, not paying heed to the fact that in Shahjahanabad you have a very different kind of a character of urban space. This is what the existing character of the place is, and this is what is proposed by the municipal corporation. So this is just to say that totally insensitive development in the absence of a study of the area in which, the context in which this is proposed. This is just to show you the area that is under the regulated area. These are all centrally protected monuments marked in red, and this is the regulated area in which, yes, first you require regulations for the regulated area, and in this case of Shahjahanabad, where it is a heritage zone of a very distinct character, definitely deserves a different set of regulations. And what INTAC has been proposing is that the height, yes, should be restricted to not more than 12 to 15 meters. The FAR, since somebody developing a building in the rest of the city fabric here would not have the advantage of the FAR in the other parts of the city, should be allowed to use whatever incentives are being provided by DDA, whether it's TDR or whatever. Building setback should not be allowed at all in this area, because the character of Shahjahanabad today is where buildings sit flush on the edge of the road. Amalgamation of plots, as we have seen, is a total disaster, definitely should not be allowed. 1 or 2 plots, yes, but not beyond that. Stilt parking again would completely change the character. Basements could be allowed, and open spaces should be retained in their original form. And this is the area of concern that again come back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Annabelle and Professor Menon. I think both of you really complemented each other, talking about the development in the protected area and the regulated area, and really brought out that what are the challenges and what should be done in the process of making the local area plan. I now invite Professor K.T. Ravindran, and I think he needs no introduction, but still he's an urban designer who is a member, governing council, chairman of Architectural Heritage Advisory Committee, and convener Delhi chapter in TAG. He is a founding trustee of the Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, trustee of the Madhavan Nair Foundation, and was member of the advisory board for the United Nations Capital Master Plan, New York. He was also the dean and the senior academic advisor, Rick School of Built Environment, member of the international jury for the AP Andhra Pradesh Capital Complex, and subsequently member of the expert committee for balanced regional growth of Andhra Pradesh state, including the capital. He was formerly vice chairman of the Environmental Impact Assessment Committee, Government of India. His most recent work was the preparation of the Resilient Urban Design Framework for low-income state housing in Tamil Nadu. He taught urban design for 3 decades in School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, and was the founding president of the Institute of Urban Designers, India. Member Governing Council of NID Ahmedabad and Vijayawada, member National Advisory Committee of Hriday Cities, mentor for the Smart City Mission of Public Open Spaces. He was the former chairman of Delhi Art Commission. He has traveled extensively across the world, and his current practice includes design of greenfield cities, cultural buildings, memorials, adaptive reuse, and urban conservation. His works and research are published in journals and books internationally. He has consistently pursued sustainable architecture and urban design, championing the cause in multiple international forums and academia. Professor Ravindran, I request you to now, because he's an urban designer and right from the beginning, you have been a teacher teaching so many and also pioneering so many projects. So, Professor Ravindran, would you highlight the prospects for a way forward of local area plan as critical components of spatial development planning in India? Professor Ravindran, please.
Thank you, Sanghamitra. I will try and be very fast because I think we are a little bit running late on time. So basically, I'd like to state how the local area plans are finding themselves a misfit in the present development process. Basically, if you look at the history of the local area plans and how it came to be introduced to Delhi as part of the master plan, now as part of the master plan, you will see the root causes of that mismatch. Basically, local area plans originally developed in Gujarat as methods and means of bringing out, filling the gaps in development process in small settlements and identifying areas for new growth and structuring the whole thing together. Now, this was a win-win kind of situation for the local area, local people, for the people who are planning, as well as people who are waiting to develop the place. So the developers, the planners, the people, everyone was happy with the idea of the local area plan. But we must remember now that it was not really a part of the larger master planning process at that time. It was attempted as one-off exercises, but quite successfully in the case of Gujarat, because the idea was acceptable to the people and all concerned because everyone stood to benefit. Then they invited the planner from who had actually been championing this from Ahmedabad as Bimal Patel into Delhi, and it was on the behest of MCD, that's Municipal Corporation of Delhi, that he came, and he presented the idea of the local area plans in Delhi. Now, they also held a number of public meetings and to air the views in kind of amongst the educated public of planners and architects and urban designers. And then it was supposed to have been adopted by the municipal areas. But of course, nothing came of it. After that government fell, nothing came of the plan. And meanwhile, in 1999, the government had already passed a government order, central government had passed an order exempting Delhi Development Authority, DDA, from the regular stipulations of the 74th Amendment. In other words, the idea that the land was developed by, the state will prepare a perspective plan, and then there will be the local bodies driven master plan process. From that, Delhi was exempted because the land and development was still under the central government. So as a result, Delhi has never actually employed the 74th Amendment in principle, right from the beginning to the end. Even till today, it is still the DDA which continues to prepare the plan, whereas the 74th Amendment very clearly states it's one of the functions of the local elected body. So this being the background, it suddenly dawned upon them that this local area plan is a very nice idea. It means actually almost direct participation of people in the planning process. So why don't we make this as part of the master plan? They did that without doing any changes to the structure of the master plan. Now that's where the first problem lies. That is, you have a master plan that is prepared by Delhi Development Authority, which is not an elected body. And that master plan becomes a legal document once it is passed. Then immediately the zonal plans are prepared, which also becomes one more further step in legality. And that zonal plan becomes the instrument with which the municipalities would negotiate the plan sanctioning process. Yeah? So you have the master plan already a legal document. All the stipulations of the master plan are inviolable for the next 20 years unless they are changed by due process. And then you have the zonal development plan, which clearly specifies densities, heights, road widening, etc., in detail. And that is also a legal document. Then in the hierarchy, in the last part of the hierarchy, they are looking at the local area plan. Now, by the time you take this plan, which is a legal document as a master plan and a zonal plan, to the local people and to the local area, you find that the rules are already written in stone. Everything is cast in stone. There's nothing, no change that you can effect on the master plan process unless one goes through a very long drawn iterative process through which provisions in the master plan can be changed. That'll take 1 or 2 years to do that change. So from the beginning, the structure in which the local area plan is incorporated within the development process by the master plan itself is erroneous, because the idea of the local area plan was to bring about direct democracy, that is where people decide through a participatory mode, they decide what is good for their own locality. Yeah? And instead of that, here you have a plan which is already a legal document. And that's what the local area has to deal with. So there are massive, they don't understand the plan. When you take a master plan or a zonal plan to the local area, they don't understand the plan because the language is not shared. Yeah? Even if it is written in Hindi, they still cannot decipher the implications of what is proposed in the plan on their own living environment. So everything comes as a rude shock to them once you try and explain an already existing plan to them, and it's almost like informing them as to what is going to be done to them by the plan. For example, master plan looks at the larger issues and has to specify, kind of arterial roads and new connectivities, and new roads are driven through localities and so on. And that is done through an established participatory process, which is also very top heavy. So it is never taken in local language to the local area, and their feedback from the people of the local area has never been taken. In such a case, some participatory moves which are taking place in kind of gentrified locations within the city, in institutions, in It's quite inclusive, those meetings. One cannot fault them for being closed in that meeting. They're open in those meetings and they make everything visible. But unfortunately, by the time it reaches the level of the local area, it's completely lost its ground reality. It's lost its link with the ground reality. So this is the major mismatch which has come in the master plan process. And sometime back, you saw Professor Menon had shown the flow diagram of how from the master plan to the zonal plan to the local area plan to the site planning exercise, how that whole hierarchy is established. In fact, what is happening now is that this hierarchy is not in favor of the local area at all. It's still a top-down process where if we have pretensions to being participatory, and if we have pretensions to having 74th Amendment in place, and we have a system where development process is anchored in the electoral process through as specified in the 74th Amendment, that those pretensions lay bare when you go to the local area with a plan. Now, this is the first problem that comes up, and there are two other important mismatches. First is that, as you know, Delhi has a number of definitions of boundaries. Professor Ribeiro had already shown us how different type of boundaries are conceptualized for the purposes of getting hold of this large mass of the metropolitan city. In that, there are what is pertinent to us in most importantly is the zonal plan boundaries. There are a number of zones in Delhi and there are zonal plans. And we also have the local area plans as defined as the ward boundary. That is, ward, as Ribeiro had also already said, is the smallest unit of planning in India. And the ward has a ward councillor. And the ward councillor is supposed to hold participatory meeting at the local level to be able to bring out the issues and aspirations of the people regarding their own locations and feed that into a planning process in the municipal body. Now, in this case, that whole thing is turned topsy-turvy. And by the time you go to the ward councillor goes to the people, he is already going with a set of plans which are cast in stone, non-negotiable in terms of change. And people realize for the first time that when the ward councillor brings these issues up, they understand for the first time that what is being given to them is not what they actually aspire for. It is based on the aspirations of the plan, master plan, or aspirations of the planners who prepare the master plan, and it does not speak their language at all. So even if it is master plan is translated to Hindi, I'm not talking about the literal language of the master plan. I'm talking about the conceptual language, a language which people understand about their own immediate environment, and a plan which is talking about the larger externalities that will impact the local quality of life. Now, this mismatch between the boundaries of the zonal plans are prepared in detail. They are the instruments which come closest to an exercise in urban design, where some things are three-dimensionally conceived, but two-dimensionally represented. They are still not three-dimensionally represented. And they are presented to the people who are aghast at the kind of drastic changes which are being proposed within their own neighborhood. Somebody may lose his shop, somebody may lose his frontage, some people may get dislocated, new major arterial roads may get driven through their locality, and new areas will be identified for, after the gap analysis, to infilling the development area with requirements for social infrastructure and physical infrastructure. All these are completely new to the people. So that is the first mismatch, is the mismatch between the zonal plan boundaries and the manner in which the boundaries are drawn are not coterminous with the boundaries that are drawn for ward committees. Yeah. Within that, there are a number of other conflicts. Like, for instance, many ward committees are drawn, on one main road. On one side, you'll have one ward, and on the other side, you have another ward. but the main road is an experience that is a unified experience. So the two different kinds of developments on either side don't talk to each other by way of planning. Now, there are various other areas of conflict. I will not go into detail because of the time. And the second one is that if we have any pretensions to having a democratic process of planning in which the electoral process, that is the ward committees and the elected representatives will call the shots about what is to be developed in local area, then we need to inverse this process of planning. It will sound radical if I say it now, because before the master plan is approved as a legal document, it needs to revisit the local area plan. And the local area plan and the master plan must have a dialogue. There should be an iterative process through which ideas and needs and aspirations are exchanged. And then the zonal plan is prepared, co-terminus with the boundaries of the local areas. That is boundaries of the electoral boundaries which are drawn for the councillors. So if the councillor has to effectively represent his people, he needs to have a boundary which is coterminous. He cannot have a zone that's cutting across his boundary, and one side of his ward is in one zone and the other one is another zone. And the characters of these two zones as defined in the zonal plan are so drastically different from each other. How does he face the people when there is such anomalies which are so visible in the whole structure of the plan? So we need to revisit the structure of delivery of our development process. And the present mechanism that is designed, that is the master plan downwards mechanism which was designed originally, is unsuitable to accommodate or is unable to accommodate the local area plan concept, even though the exercise to revisit the structure was never done. They've said, this is a very nice plan. It involves people's participation. Let's have local area plans in the master plan. But where is the structural change? They've never attempted that structural change. I think the first step then for the Delhi master plan to do now would be, before it becomes a legal document. It's a wonderful plan. I am not faulting the plan at all. The plan is very well drawn up, but the problem is quite outside the plan itself. It is in the process of delivery of development using the plan as an instrument. It's in that process the fault lies. And that process needs to be rectified before the master plan becomes a legal document. That is, we need to very quickly move into the local areas, prepare the plans for them within a time-bound method, and then give that feedback to the master plan to see how a dialogue can be opened up between the larger vision of the plan and the local area plan. Unless this is done, we cannot have a democratic delivery of the planning system. I'll stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Menon. I think, Professor Katie, and I think you have really brought out a revolutionary concept that how the zonal plan is required to bridge between the master plan and the local area plan. I hope that all these suggestions will help the DDA and the organization which helping for the master plan, and it will go to them, and not only for Delhi, but in other areas as well, because the problems are there in all the cities and all the areas. So with that, there is some questions which have come up. So I think I will take some of them, the questions, and request the speakers to answer them. So Professor Ribeiro, there is a question, Professor Ribeiro, there is a question from
Question
Mr.
answers.
The Navin Piplani to Professor Ribeiro. I hope Professor Ribeiro, you're there?
Yes, I'm hearing.
Okay. So the question is, one of the challenges that is shared time and again is local bodies do not have the capacity to prepare the local area plans. How does one deal with this challenge at ground?
Yes. Well, I'm going to give a bit of a longish answer because I also want to give an answer in a question mark to what Katie has just raised. First of all, the concept of the 73rd, 74th Amendment, when it was forced, it was a one man, one vote system. It was the electoral process, right? And the decision then taken was, I think I'm right in saying so, the whole of India was covered by it, with the exception of the area of New Delhi Municipal Committee. That was a decision which was left out from the electoral process. I know that JRD, Mr. Ratan Tata tried very hard to get Jamshedpur also left out from it. He did not succeed, but this was the only area which never had local elections. The moment you have had local elections, it was under the 74th Constitutional Amendment. So if someone in the ministry has passed an order that you can leave the whole of NDMC out, of course you can leave there. You have to leave the whole of NDMC out. But if you leave the whole of the Union Territory or the NCTD out, there is something wrong, then that means no elections at the third level for the NC. The fact you're having elections for wards, the fact you're bringing in the wards in place, there is something wrong in the ministry's order. That is, I'm sure. Even in saying if the New Delhi Municipal Committee will become a municipal in the council, then it means what do you do about the local areas there? Then they said 4 MLAs elected in that constituency, they will double up as the that is the answer they gave the government then, that they will double up as the councillors for that area. I'm just saying this. That is one thing. Second thing is the question of, I agree with Katie also that the mismatch can be sorted out. And I suggested one thing, the 3 mismatches in geographic jurisdiction, they can be brought on the same platform and they should be brought on the same. That is one, the boundaries of the master plan zones, the boundaries of the 5 municipalities, and the boundaries of the revenue districts. At the moment, the boundaries of the municipal corporations and the zones are coterminous. It is within it, the wards could vary. But when you have the next, I think one person, one office that can do it now is the office of the Lieutenant Governor. He can easily say, when you have the next exercise in reconstituting the wards, which will happen in another 2-3 years, make sure that the edges are sorted out and that they all fit into it. It's possible. It's also possible that when you, because the same government deals, you can bring all this on the same platform. The boundaries which stand very strongly, I agree, are the master plan zonal boundaries. But that is one thing, it's an exercise to continue. Coming to the question of what Mr. Raised about the local governments do not have the capacity. Of course, they don't have the capacity, but you have to build it up. Recently, I'm faced in Goa with a question asked by the High Court. They have asked the government that your schedule 12 of the says that town planning is a subject to be addressed by the local government, How are you solving that problem? If town planning is addressed by the state at the regional level, if it's addressed by the state at the city level, and the answer which has emerged, yes, we are addressing that subject through local area plans. I've just sort of mentioned that. The local area plans, they have to understand, each ward has to understand what a local area plan is. But if they are unable to do it, in their absence, the state is empowered to prepare a plan for them. The second is, if they are not able to do it, They can engage consultants also. There are budgets provided for all this. It's the question of, I mean, it is even happening for master plans. If I'm not mistaken, some consultants were also engaged in upgrading the master plan for the year 41. Regarding heritage, I can understand the problem which Delhi is facing after listening to what Annabelle and Poogie have said. But if I'm a judge, say, let's say, if I'm sitting here as a judge, and to me, what is heritage? Heritage is what is defined in law, right? And the law clearly and simply states that the archaeological survey will take care of a boundary which they will determine for protecting. They will also take care through the National Monuments Authority, 100 meters minimum and a 200 meters beyond that as minimum, as no development and a regulated zone. And how they will handle it is as per the law. If there is anything in addition to that which doesn't fit into it, then it is left for the Town and Country Planning Acts to sort of areas for conservation. That is flexible. You can add, subtract to it. The important thing is, it is the role of the planner to map it. Whom would I blame if these things have not happened upfront? I think the planner has to take the blame because he has the plan with him. If in 1958 Act, they have given you their areas, as they have done in Goa, they've given us the exact boundaries, we should have mapped it. Second is, you have to map the 100 meters and 300 meters line. It is the planner who should have gone to the National Monuments Authority to help them map it. Because the mapping, the planner can't wait for others to come to them. That has to be mapped. Because I remember Annabelle is saying, if this was mapped at the right time, one can understand if it was not mapped before 210. But if a brand new building is coming after 2010, then I think it doesn't make sense. The other important thing is, there is a lot of mention about archaeological parks. Please remember, an archaeological park is not mentioned anywhere in the Archaeology Acts. It's neither in the 58 National Act or in the State Supportive Act. So that means it's an issue which has to be imposed under the Town and Country Planning Act, which is the Delhi Development Act, right? In Old Goa, it is court terminus, which is good. But all the provisions for protection is mentioned there. But if they want to bring it somewhere else, the archaeological survey will say this is not our area. So that is one thing we have to take into. I'm a little surprised that the whole mention of the walled city has been made as a heritage. I don't think that is very easy to do. The walled city has a very checkered history. The first plan said the whole of walled city is a slum. They did it because to get money out of the environmental improvement of urban slums. Now it is not a slum, now it is a heritage city. Once it is a heritage city, the ASI said, we didn't say so. State Archaeology Department say, we didn't say so. Now, if the DDA says so, then they should lay down the guidelines of how they want the whole area to be. Within it, there will be problems, but you have to make it known. You have to start the exercise in mapping and start the consultative process. Largely, you have to restrict growth. The great advantage of having the 100 meters and 200 meters line is because there was so much of agitation of activists of saying there is so much of development taking around protected monuments, right? And what are you doing about it? And that's why these lines have come in. So it's a belt which is to be done within which you have regulated growth, controlled FER, etc., etc. You have to start building all these things in. And I think the question is we should prepare these plans and there's nothing like mapping. If you map it at that level, like it happened to us when we were mapping something in Delhi, in one of the outlying cities of Nazafgarh, those people were surprised that there's a 100-meter master plan road going through their area. And the councillor said, you know, those your planners sitting in the ivory tower have done that. They are not seeing the ground level. And the councillor was right. He said, I've got so many thousand juggies there, and you want me to take the responsibility? He says, no, it is the master plan road. You should have consulted me. There's a possibility of making adjustments. Why were not? So this but now that it has come on the plan, when in Calcutta, I was telling you the other day, then we told the local councillor, what are these buildings here? I said, those are heritage buildings. You have to take them into. He said, I didn't know I had heritage buildings. At least that knowledge sharing, if it is there, then you're able to make out, you know, where I stand. Otherwise, you're saying this is a mess from this top-down. You see, we cannot perpetuate a top-down process any longer, right? You have talking of down top. You're talking of elected people at the ground level. You're talking of participatory development, right? You're talking of elected councillors and panchas who cannot be superseded, right? They are giving you more than 1/3%. There are constituencies where half the elected are reserved for ladies. All these are happening there. It's not happening in the state-center relationship. And all these are great advantages one has to take care. There's nothing like mapping. I want to yet see a map of Delhi which shows all the things which Annabelle has shown. If that is spread all over Delhi, I want to see even those dots showing which are the buildings to be conserved. At least you will get somewhere. You will know this is conservation. If you're not happy with the amount you want to add, make sure it comes in through the process. If you think that is too much for us to handle, take it out of the process. Because people are asking, you've made my building heritage. What does it mean? My building is heritage, you're restricting me. My neighbor is not. So you can do whatever he wants. What crime have I committed and why has he done it? You see, all these are issues which will be answered across the table. And I think the question is, I still insist, it is accountability. It's the accountability of the ward councillor. The ward councillor in Delhi doesn't want to be accountable. He prefers calling people to his darbars around his house. Let me tell you that. That was the whole exercise. Get him away from that. Get him to meet the people. You see, that is where the down top process. And I think we have to all live as, and it's a great thing for us professionals to work around that, because it places you at the center of growth. At least you will say, I cannot do this because this is what the citizens are telling me to do. That's a great advantage. Otherwise, you'll be stuck there. What can I do? I've been forced to do it. And otherwise, I'll be transferred. All that thing is going on. And I think we have to work on this. We have to find ways and means of take live exercises all over. The first thing is identify your ward councillor. It took us a long time, as Poogie has said, to identify those ward councillors. Mapping, right? Look at the amount of hurdles we are facing. Suddenly, the only maps that matter are the Survey of India maps. And suddenly you're saying that, oh, we can't give you that because that is secret. You see, these maps can't be secret any longer because as people are saying the enemy has better maps than we have, right? You know, because these days it's possible to get these maps. Why we have to refer to Google? Because Google has a lot of distortions, right? So map the touch-me-nots, and Delhi is a great example for that. Take all your master plan parameters and take those parameters and map it at the local level. Master plan fleshes it out at the zonal level. Take those parameters and flesh it out. Take all the things which are operational uses, flesh them out. And once you have it there, you tell the citizen, these are the touch-me-nots around which local areas go. And that is how it is going to work. Sorry, but it's an exercise where we just cannot throw our hands up. I agree with Katie. He has very brilliantly put all the kind of bottlenecks which are being faced with. But I think we should face them and we should address them. I think it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ribeiro. I think it shows really a way forward and the importance and how the planners can definitely play a role in helping the people and the government. Thank you so much. I now take up the next question, which is to Annabelle, and also along with I add my query also. So Anjali Panchali, she is asking to Annabelle, is there any provision for maintaining the facade of existing heritage listed buildings in Shahjahanabad? Annabelle, I also add to that because as you have showed that there also should be regulations for the new structures like View Control Act policies and others in the heritage areas, because as you rightly said, there is a large area and a large portion of the built fabric is not listed. So Annabelle, please.
Yes. So in Delhi, the Unified Building Bylaws have limits of permissible change to the heritage buildings, to all notified buildings. There is a grade 1 building in which you cannot make any change. And you can't even add buildings in the complex unless you take permission from the Heritage Conservation Committee. So if you're talking about notified heritage buildings, then the facade is definitely protected. But for buildings in Shahjahanabad, the recommendation that INTAC is making for the rest of the city fabric is that new development should be conducive to what is there on the rest of the street. So heritage properties, yes, the facades are protected. The rest of the city fabric, it will be based on if these regulations are enforced, the proposed regulations are enforced, then it would be based on the decision that perhaps HCC will take as the regulatory body.
Thank you,
Yes.
Annabelle. Are you okay? I mean, is it done?
Yes.
Annabelle?
Is that
Okay.
answer your
So,
question, Anjali?
yeah, and yes, and I think that also should be also complemented with some incentives because these are mostly the private properties. So how to do that is also a very pragmatic question and a challenge. Thank you so much. I now request Mr. Jignesh Mehta from the CEPT University. He has a question. So may I request Mr. Mehta to you ask the question directly to the speaker.
Professor Basu, he has actually left the meeting just now. You can ask
Okay.
his question here, and I can send him the message regarding the answer.
Okay. So Mr. Mehta from CEPT University is asking to Mr. K.T. Ravindran that it seems currently Master Plan of Delhi 2041 has no provision for preparation of local area plans for heritage area and precincts. And an important question it raises is what kind of heritage local area plans should be prepared? That is, as Mr. Ribeiro should it do all three: a spatial, number one, a spatial plan identifying heritage structure, contributing structures and public areas to be conserved and enhanced. Number two, a set of regulations and incentives for conservation and preservation. Number three, guidelines for improving public areas. So I think he's also giving some recommendations. I really don't understand what is his question. Aditi, can you throw some more light into this?
So he wanted to know that what should be the area of focus for the heritage LAPs. So, I mean, what should be prioritized at first, and how should we go down deciding what has to be included, including the guidelines or the incentives at the local level? Because we have a lot of private lived-in structures, and regulations should align to those aspects also. So he also mentions that okay, these particular parameters can be included. So yeah, I think
So I think he's giving more of a suggestions. Professor Ravindran or Professor Menon or Annabelle, do you have anything to add to this? That I think a lot has been discussed already, but anything to add? That how the heritage local area plans should be prepared? Anything to add? Katie? Katie, you're on mute.
If I might just add a comment here, the point I was making is that we cannot make a rule without understanding the reality. So, as we were saying, that understand what the ground realities are. If, for example, if you take, for example, something like Khidki Village development has come within 10 meters of Khidki Mosque. Now, then, what kind of a regulation will I make? Whereas, on the other hand, I might have Nizamuddin tomb, where I've got ample area which is around, and I might have another kind of regulation. So I begin by asking the conservation person, let's have a variety of rules and regulations, context specific. Each context will produce its own context where the significance of the heritage is identified, and we try and protect as much as possible the significance. As Annabelle mentioned, that one is to understand what is it that we are trying to protect. 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters is not the issue that we're going to fight over. We're going to fight over what is the significance we want to protect. Sometimes the significance may be protected by having a building next to it. And if that is so, let us see how it can be done. So the challenge I'm putting towards the planner and the conservation architect is that can we think in a flexible way? Instead of in a rigid way that says 100 meters, 200 meters, here it is, I've done a job, now you best of luck. It does not work. Similarly, the planner also says, I made a wonderful plan, here it is, these are the land uses, this is all very rational. But when we make a local area plan, we find that it has not worked. Now, what do I do then? So I think that is the challenge for local area plans. It forces the planner and the conservation architect to think a bit out of the box. Within the box is very simple. The box has been defined all over the world, and we can always pick up something and say, well, this is what the box says, this is the way we should do it, this is the best way of doing it. But how to think out of the box based on the context? I think this is what the local area plan has taught us, that we got to begin to look at our disciplines in a slightly different way. We cannot pick up standards and say, well, this should what the standard be. We should, because look at Delhi, for example. Professor Ribeiro said that 1483 square meters, but 80% of the area has already been developed. What more am I going to plan? How is this 80% of the area that has got developed? How does it exist? So, the master plan parameters are quite different. It is no longer a greenfield situation. It's a brownfield situation. In a brownfield situation, how do we plan? And do you know, in the 60 years, we've not done a redevelopment plan except to break it down and rebuild it. We've never done that's why I showed you that Varanasi. We are unable to make a redevelopment plan for Varanasi, a dense area like Varanasi or Shahjahanabad or any part of Delhi, because we have not taught ourselves to do it. But we have taught ourselves that clean it all up and make it anew. That is not planning, because those days are gone. We are now in a very dense area that's already been developed, that's Delhi. And if we're going to make Delhi better, what we have to do is to establish new parameters.
Yes, Professor Menon, this is what you are rightly pointed out, the context specific. And if you see the AMSAR Act, it is already, the provision is there for making the context specifics. Only it hasn't been said. Professor Ribeiro, would you like to add something? Yes, it has not been done. It has not been done. The provision is there in the law.
The provision is there. Everything, our laws are perfect, but nothing is done.
Exactly.
Why is it not done is the challenge to the profession.
Yes, right. It's absolutely right.
Can I
yes, Professor Ribeiro. Yes, please.
You see, to preserve, now heritage are of two types, natural and man-made. And man-made again are of two varieties, movable and immovable. Man-made heritage, we're talking of immovable heritage, but a lot of pressure falls on the National Monuments Authority for that 100 meters, 300 meter line, where a lot of the problems are, and how do you go about it? And for that, they have created a competent authority. In Goa, they made the chief planner the competent authority. He has to prepare one set of plans, which is more regulatory. Another set of plan was what you do with this natural heritage, which he reports to the National Monuments Authority. It is mandatory now under this law, all your 3,500 monuments to have this plans done by National Monuments Authority. And as placed before Parliament, the last meeting, as far as I know, only 3 such plans have been approved. Only 3. 2 of them are in Delhi. The plans done by Ratish Nanda and his team around Nizamuddin. Second, I think, for Suneri Bagh. And the third is for a building in Lucknow. No other plan is still approved, which gives you all the guidelines, the building bylaws. So these are the only plans you can refer to, which is people get a guideline what you can do and what you cannot do. They can be seen. So I'm just saying, 2 of the 3, to the best of my knowledge, by the final authority for this, the National Monuments Authority, are in Delhi. Please check on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Annabelle, would you like to add anything? Or Katie, would you like to add anything?
I would like to add one small point in addition to what Mr. Menon has just articulated. The need for a context-specific plan as far as the heritage areas are concerned. I think one cannot overemphasize the need for that. It's really there, but there are 2 different types of contexts that we deal with when it comes to heritage, which is embedded in the city's fabric. When archaeological survey has defined 100 meter, 200 meter, and they say it's actually a municipal function to define what can be allowed and what may not be allowed. Now in Delhi, you submit a plan to the municipality. If it is within that zone, send it to the NMA and the archaeological survey, and you need to get their approval before the municipality can. Now, the rules of the game are undefined. So there is urgent need for context-specific bylaws to be drawn up. That certainly is the case. The second issue is that of unprotected heritage embedded in the fabric of the city. That is, within the housing areas, you find building which requires to be protected, privately owned and unprotected. How does one protect these places without an efficient local area plan? The local area plan has to identify these monuments to be protected, specify the type of allowed uses in them, depending on the will of the people who live around there, and then make that as part of the master plan or part of the zonal plan. That's the only process through which we can actually protect the unprotected fabric within the old city. Otherwise, if the provision to protect buildings is given to the local municipality, one has to work very closely with the municipality and the people to be able to negotiate the gap that exists between building owners and the municipality and the funding organizations and so on. So in fact, Intact Delhi chapter is working on this. Annabelle is heading that team, and we have been having a number of discussions on this. And we are in the process of preparing a proposal for incorporation in the master plan. So all this is contingent upon a sensitively drawn up local area plan, which identifies embedded heritage within the old fabric and then makes provisions for it to be protected legally through the zonal plan. That's all I would like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Annabelle, would you like to add anything? Oh, Professor Ribeiro, sorry, Professor Ribeiro.
No, one word of advice, keep
Yes.
it simple. And please remember, as a principle, if the common man doesn't understand your plan, then it is not a plan. As a principle, we just keep it simple. And
Okay.
as
Thank
few
you.
as possible.
No, can I just add one thing here, Professor Basu?
Yes, yes.
one positive thing that has happened in this new plan is that all the notified heritage has been mapped and put on a where, etc. Exact boundaries have been notified, and this is what this new master plan has done. It is all there in the plan. All the 1,208 buildings plus another 500 have been GPS coordinated and shown in the plan. So the step one has been taken. Step one is that we know where they are and what they are. Now we can't have anything missing because it's there. It's been recorded. Second is the next step comes, and that is where the problem. That's what Preeti was saying that we're working on. What can happen to these unprotected buildings, private properties? We need bylaws. So the existing bylaws are not adequate. Special bylaws have to be made. So this is being worked on. So it's a long, painful process, but it begins with the local area plan. You got to know what it is, where it is, and what is the condition. So I think that is the purpose of today's meeting anyway, that the importance of local area plans. And unfortunately, the 41 master plan says no local area plans, which is an absolute surprise. Why it should say no local area plans?
Thank you, Professor Menon. Annabelle, would you like to add anything?
Yes, just to say that in addition to mapping the tangible heritage or the built heritage of Delhi, a part of our proposal to NIUA when they asked us to get involved in assisting with the master plan was also to map the concentration of intangible heritage. And they have reflected that in the master plan by saying cultural zones should be mapped, but that exercise unfortunately hasn't gone any further beyond that one line to say it should be mapped. So hopefully they will look at some point, DDA will look at also identifying these cultural zones and making it mandatory to have some kind of regulation that guides these areas.
Thank you, Annabelle. Actually, though a lot of challenges and a lot of conflicts have been brought up, but I think at the end, we are also there with a lot of hopes because we can see a lot of positive steps have been taken up or in the process. And we hope that with Delhi's thing, we also can learn and see the other cities and other areas in India that how to, because every context has its own challenges and possibilities. I think with this, I end up the question answer session. And thank you so much. I will now request Niyoti Jiggasu, the coordinator of National Scientific Committee of ICOMOS Historic Towns and Villages, to give the summary and vote of thanks. Niyoti.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for participating. And with all these questions and discussions that we have been having on the chat also, so it has been a very interesting session and with so much insight, which also has given a lot of things which should not be done, but at the same time, like ma'am just said, that it has given us a lot of hope also that a lot of things which can be done over the time. So. What I would just like summarize in a very short this thing by taking from each of the panelists. Ribeiro sir, he talked a lot about, he started with saying that, the local area plans are basically, the idea is that they are transparent and they are not easy to change. So they would be a good shift to, something which is for the people and through the people, which is very much very important and very critical. And the basic idea is that though the Master Plan 2041 does a great job to define a perspective of development, there's an importance of the LAPs to ground the perspectives of MPD and translate it into the roadmap for grassroots development. Menon sir, he talked, basically he gave a lot of examples, and that entire narrative talked about, the landscape of conflict at the citizen government interface. And the most important learning basically came down to that, one is that the planners and the conservation architects, we will need to, find a common middle ground. Also, we will have to find, a different way of learning. And important learning was basically that we change our process and the flow of planning, where perhaps in some manner the local area plans precede and inform the master plans or zonal plans to simplify and resolve the issues of infrastructure services, built environment, including heritage. It has to be supported and facilitated with the relevant institution and regulatory frameworks. Annabal's examples are very crisp and very clean in the sense that they actually brought out a very clean understanding of trying to put forward the very basic 2 points, saying that, site-specific regulations are very, very important because they can also, prevent a lot of investments that is actually done in trying to, develop and plan these development projects which go into it. And also it has a very strong where you have to look at the significance and the local, the sensitiveness to the local heritage. So all the three examples had very, strong understanding of how these aspects have to be actually looked at. And so specific site-specific guidelines for development in heritage zones, which can enrich and strengthen the process of planning, especially at the LAP level, would be very, very crucial. K.T. Ravindran, he made us the understanding of, how the journey of LAPs migrated from Gujarat to Delhi, and then without restructuring and modifying, this has, been put forward here. So which has actually created the conflict in the translation of planning activities that are expected to be participatory and democratic in line with the principles of the Constitution. So this disparity has to be, basically addressed, and he efficiently articulated the structural flaws in the mechanism of the delivery of the services in Delhi, and to avoid the inefficiency and fallbacks of the previous master plan, it's very important to revisit and resolve these flaws. So this is a very, very short gist of what has been said, but I think we can definitely go back to Facebook and, relook at it and re-listen to the entire thing to, understand the complete insights that we have got. So I would just like to thank everybody for, participating here in the sense of listening to us and also being here with us. Making of master plans and its implementations are very complex exercise and need a lot of critical understanding. So with the discussions which actually surrounding this topic, which started because of the Master Plan Delhi 2041, which is actually what is going around in the talks with everybody, we at ICOMOS India hope to continue the deliberations with more webinars over the next month, looking at the Master Plan and related aspects at the level of other cities. So you will continue to see us with, different aspects that we will be taking forward and having a lot of deliberations over the time. I thank ICOMOS India for this opportunity, for having this event, and especially the executive committee, especially Naveen Piplani, President ICOMOS India, for the backing for this entire process, and Shalini for the organizational support. Thank you so much, Professor Ribeiro, Professor Menon, Annabelle, and Professor Ravindran for accepting our invite. We wouldn't have more apt speakers who could speak on such significant and complex topic. It has been indeed very, very insightful for all of us. Thank you, Dr. Basu, for moderating the session, as usual, always perfectly done. And I should not forgetting Gaurav, Aditi, and Lipika for the support with the organizing and the conduct. We thank you all for participating, and we'll look forward to meeting all of you at other deliberations in the coming months. So thank you, and good evening to everybody.